Thanks, Jamie. Hopefully everybody can hear me and see me. And I'll invite my panel group to come on camera and on mic as well, so we can kind of start our portion. Thanks to the my team to get us to this point and playing nice in the sandbox and actually leaving me with a good amount of time for our panel. So I totally appreciate you guys for that. Um, my name is Stefan. For those of you that maybe haven't met as yet, I wear the hat of Chief Revenue Officer here at Swift Comply, which is really kind of a fancy title to say that I get to have my fingers in the kind of the entire customer experience. And so I have a vested interest in the experience that our clients have with us, kind of from cradle to grave, like from when we start prospecting through the sales process, right through to becoming customers and supporting you guys ongoing and Zach and his team working with you all ongoing. Um, Before I get my panelists to do their intros, just a bit about kind of this group we brought together and why. Um, Prior to me joining Swift Comply, I actually worked in GovTech for software companies, more around the budgeting process and also performance and planning. And so it was interesting. I worked with a lot of people like Amy, like Ria, like Chris, who are on the panel, trying to support them with building strategic plans and connecting those plans to their budgets. And I can tell you that working with those folks, that level of folks within a city, within a utility, within an organization, they are sponges for the kind of data that that people at a program level, like our customer base here at Swift Comply, have. And I was kind of struck by when I joined Swift Comply how that data exists, but there's kind of maybe a bridge or a gap in the communication of that data helping to flow through to the planners and the budgeters like Amy, like Ria, like Chris. And so I think it's really cool to bring a panel together from that side of the fence here and for uh, our customers who are kind of working in the literal trenches to kind of hear what it's like to be on that other side of the desk and what those people are looking for and what helps them do their job and kind of bringing those together. So anyways, that's a view to what we are going to get into in our discussion here as a panel, but maybe I'll pass it over to them to do quick intros. So, Amy, maybe you want to go first and just do a quick intro. Tell us kind of where you're coming from and a little bit about your role today.
Uh, Sure. Um, Thank you for inviting me to today's session. I do serve as the Chief Strategic Officer for the city of Denton in Denton, Texas. I oversee the Office of Strategy, Budget, and Performance, which is part of the city manager's office. And, we really focus on helping the organization align strategy, performance, budgeting, and organizational priorities across departments. My water sector experience really is in my earlier career when I served as a business manager with my previous city. In that role, I was responsible for the financial operations of the water utility, including budgeting, financial reporting, cost of service analysis, and rate making. And then at the city of Denton, I continue to work closely with our water, wastewater, environmental services, and sustainability teams, really focused on budget development and then supporting them in telling their story through data.
Thanks, Amy. I'll pass it over to Ria.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ria Pavia. I'm the Deputy Director of Innovation, Performance Management, and Audit here for the City of Ontario, Southern California, not Canada. I have a very similar background and job, I would say, to Amy, where I oversee all of these cities' strategic initiatives, their KPI, and then also working with the different agencies to tell stories based on their data.
Cool. Thanks, Ria. And then Chris, I'll turn it over to you. And I know we didn't preview this part, but I hope you talk a little bit about kind of how you ended up where you're at today, because that's where you and I first met was back in your Resource X days. So tell us a little bit about kind of the role you do, how you got there.
Sounds great, Stefan, and great to be with you and the panel and the audience here today. Hey, Trish, this is fantastic. My background was in local government, interestingly enough, through utilities is how I got into all this work in the very beginning, calculating rate models, infrastructure needs, and big surprise, finding out that most of the time agencies don't have enough resources to fund key priorities, and parlayed that experience and curiosity into what happens in the rest of the budget process overall. I had a period of time where I worked within local government in budget development, strategic planning in a large county out in Colorado. So to the earlier panelist from CDPHE, right down the street from me, and then ultimately got involved in the budgeting for outcomes movement, which nowadays, as GFOA government finance officers refers to it as rethinking the budget. And it was along this path that Stefan and I crossed paths many times. Stefan in his work in the budget product development, ongoing budget work with Questica way back when, and then subsequently in Invisio in the field of budget transformation and aligning resources and finding scarce resources. That's where my work has continued to lead me. Nowadays, my company was acquired by Tyler Technologies in the GovTech world, and I work on the future of budgeting and priority-based budgeting in particular here at Tyler Tech.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate you guys all being here. The most important question I'm going to ask all day, when we were doing our prep call, Amy and Ria, you guys both shared that you have all female teams that compete in the pipe tapping competitions at like ACE and WEFTech. So I'm just wondering if anybody wants to do a throwdown here, like any side wagers on who's got the better team.
Oh, it's going to be Denton all the way.
Well, Amy did say they got first place, and I admitted I think we came in second. So I have
Well,
full confidence, but
I'm going to be at
I'll throw
ACE.
down
I'm going to be at ACE in June. So I'm going to watch the contest and hopefully they're both there. We'll see who wins. Um, More seriously, I wanted to bring it back to, one of the survey questions that we touched on earlier, and I think the first panel kind of touched on it too, as Zach, was this gap between leadership's understanding and appreciation of kind of the work that's done in the literal trenches when it comes to water compliance. And I'm wondering if you guys see that from your seat. Like, do you see some gaps there between the comprehension understanding of the work that's actually being done in those types of programs? And maybe, I mean, anyone can chime in. I don't necessarily tag anybody, but Ria, you're showing up on my screen, so I'll ask you first.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely agree. There could be a disconnect. I do want to mention that prior to working in the city manager's office, I worked for our utility agency as an analyst. So I really got to know the technical staff and that supported them in an administrative way, also doing rate studies and kind of understanding how they do business. But water compliance is always treated as a must because it's regulatory in nature, right? So we know it's happening and we know we have to do it, but sometimes leadership or decision makers don't fully understand the complexity of the work that's being done with boots on the ground. And a lot of it is extremely technical. And if you're not directly involved in it every day, it could be difficult to fully grasp that from the leadership point of view and all the resources that are needed behind it. So I feel like if the departments can't clearly articulate the whys behind their work, the community impact, it often gets overlooked.
Yeah. Just building off that a bit, Ria, like, do you find that that impacts decision making when it comes to like funding and resourcing? Does that comprehension, is there kind of like a connection there, like a correlation between comprehension and then also resourcing?
Absolutely, especially when you're doing performance-based budgeting, the things that are getting the most recognition, the things that the community is very like privy to, and all the data stories that are happening. It's always the cool stuff, the exciting things that get the funding. But
Yeah.
I mean, not to offend anyone, this may not always be cool and exciting. So
Yeah.
it's harder in that way to communicate like, hey, I need resources too if we want to continue having clean water for the residents and being, well, our goal is to become, one of the premier communities in the empire. So that's
Yeah.
why strategic decision making is often made in favor of the programs that have the most visible impact and public, like the best public marketing. Almost. Like it's a popularity contest.
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
Um,
I couldn't, if I,
yeah.
if
Go ahead,
I
Chris.
could
Yeah,
jump
jump in.
in, I couldn't agree more possibly with what Ria had just mentioned. And I only have points to add. Um, Oftentimes, one challenge that takes place for the budgeting process is that it can be an incremental process where you take last year's budget and you look at your financial forecast, and it's an incremental change from some baseline. And if that is the type of budgeting that you practice, seldom do we have the chance to actually look at what that base budget includes, and it's a lost opportunity. Or said a different way, the opportunity before us is to be crystal clear about what is in that base that we fund, including the often overlooked programs and services that are in water compliance, among other things, and to consistently come to appreciate and reappreciate the alignment and value of what we fund on an ongoing basis. That might not be the new flashy thing as Ria was describing, but the consistent, absolutely pivotal, necessary funding that needs to go to these vital programs.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew you would have a solid opinion on that, Chris. Like just working with a lot of different clients on their actual budgeting process, and I'm often fascinated and curious kind of what you must see, sitting with cities as the different departments are kind of coming through and making these pitches and like, how important is it that awareness, like you see evidence of that correlation needing to be there of comprehension to actually helping get that resourcing?
Yeah, and I do like the word comprehension. It's in the work that we do, there is a base level foundation of data that we
Yeah.
have to come to understand. And the first question, if you asked anybody on your city council, give me 100 programs and services that we offer, can you give me 10? And you start to work through that list, it would be impressive if you had an elected leader, or sometimes even an executive leader, administrative leader, who can really get down to the fundamentals of water compliance, and drinking water and wastewater and stormwater systems and what we do. If you happen to have an engineer on staff, or
Yeah.
as an elected official, fantastic. But really having that inventory, it is eye-opening to say the least. Here is the business of government. Here's the business of our utility. Here's the business of our enterprise. And to understand the 300 or 400 or 500 different distinct business lines or programs and services that you fund is actually really important if we're going to understand what their needs are for the future. What are we funding today?
Yeah. Amy, I'm really curious to hear your take on this because of the background you've had working like in the water sector or departments. Like, do you see this gap and like how does it manifest itself?
Yeah, and I love how aligned Ria and I are in our background and the work that we do and where that's all led us to. But I 100% agree that there's a gap. We've got our frontline workers that are dealing with very complex conditions, regulatory expectations, and just the really constant operational challenges that, we've said it before numerous times, I think already today, out of sight, out of mind. So not really visible at the leadership level. And sometimes by the time it reaches leadership, it's condensed into summaries, dashboards. I love a dashboard, but sometimes it doesn't always really capture the full effort, the judgment calls, the pressures that are involved. But I do want to say that it's not a lack of care or a lack of commitment from leadership. It again goes back to just that lack of visibility. And I see this as an opportunity. I think that if we can build stronger lines of communication, bring real world context, real world stories into our discussions, make the space for storytelling around our data. I think that we can help close that gap. Because I do feel like when leadership better understands the realities, of what our frontline workers are experiencing, it strengthens trust throughout the organization and just really leads to better and more informed decisions, particularly decisions as we go through that budget process and are making decisions around funding. Because Chris is right when listing all of those services that we offer. This isn't probably one that really rises to the top. It's just an expectation, right? It's an expectation in terms of the quality of our water, the quality of compliance. And so that's an expectation I don't think is always thought of as a service. It is just a must
Yeah.
in our communities.
I'm wondering if you guys have any like specific examples of maybe good, bad, or ugly where sitting in that chair of trying to work through a budget, preparing a budget for the next year, and having departments come and present to you, making pitches for funding and allocation, and try, especially it doesn't have to be water. Water would be a great example, but something that's technical in nature where there is kind of that language barrier. And have you seen anybody do like either a really good job of that and presenting something technical to make their case? Or maybe somebody flamed out completely and did a horrible job. But I'm curious, like kind of what works, what doesn't work when in that kind of process.
I would say that one of my primary functions here is really reviewing the agenda reports that come across to council and that are being made to the public. And when you see the writer and you see that it's an engineer or like some kind of data quality specialist, you're reading it and you're like, this is very technical. Like I always am constantly having to send it back. Like the public is going to be reading this, the council is going to be reading this, and you're using a lot of fancy technical language and acronyms where you're not giving the background of why do we need X amount of money to be able to perform a test or recondition the wells, whatever it might be. The explanation in the background is not always as strong, and they use all that technical language to talk about compliance and regulations, and that completely goes over people's heads. So I see it constantly in agenda reports that are being written to be posted to the public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes
And
sense.
Rhea and Amy too, you're both spot on in terms of conveying technical complexity and its importance. Oftentimes in program budgeting, which is budgeting at the program level, and ultimately outcome or priority-based budgeting, which we all share this background. Oftentimes we hear that the mechanism of priority-based budgeting is like a Rosetta Stone, if you've heard that term before, a translation device. And Rhea, as I was listening to you, so often it is a translation step from the business of engineers and technicians and professionals to the outcomes or the priorities of policymakers and our residents and the community that we serve. And it doesn't take away the importance of the technical aspect, Stefan, in our experience, but instead places the importance on, tell me why this helps us become a safer community. Tell me why this program leads to environmental sustainability and quality and health outcomes that we're striving to achieve. Tell me for our economic vitality and our growth plans for this community, where these water issues directly feed into the successful build out and capacity planning for our community overall. So if I were to leave you with one point on this that we've seen successful, it's just being mindful of it's not too hard to do, but the translation, that final step to convey the technical need in the language of policymakers and priorities.
Yeah. No one's told me any spicy stories yet. Like you don't have to mention any names.
I
Amy,
won't.
did you
I
have
won't
anything
go.
to add
I won't.
there?
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think I'll go spicy. I won't go spicy. But I always say, what's the WIFM? What's in it for me? Why does it matter? Why does it matter to leadership? Why does it matter to the public? So I love what Chris said about, just framing it around safe drinking water, public health, environmental stewardship, and really creating that. And I think visualizations matter. So simple dashboards, trend graphics. I find that some of the most successful requests for additional resources are when departments come in and they can give you why it matters, what risks they're managing, what outcomes they're trying to achieve. Again, why does it matter? Why does it matter? Right? Showing what that work looks over time, storytelling, connecting. I will even say I have seen visualizations in the form of photos to really show
Mhm.
leadership what this issue looks like. I have seen that be incredibly impactful because you're giving them a glimpse at something that they're not accustomed to seeing day in and day out. So if you've got that, that can be very impactful as well in a budget presentation and a request for resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, great point, Amy. I was thinking about your visualization with photos. Everybody loves a good Nessie curve or a total cost of ownership model or a deferred liability backlog graph if you're technical in nature. But to see what it looks like when you have inland flooding because you don't have the infrastructure, or a water outage, or water quality issues, God forbid, Flint, Michigan. That's what we're really talking about, and pictures can be worth 1,000 words.
You guys were talking about kind of connecting to the strategic plan. I was curious, one of the survey stats we brought up earlier was that, like, I think I pulled up here, 66% of our respondents said they don't link their strategic, or they don't link their program goals to a strategic plan. And just under 30% weren't actually even aware if their organization had a strategic plan. I'm curious what your thoughts are around those stats. Do you find those surprising, alarming? And then part B of that question, like how important is that from your chair, like where you guys sit and the roles that you do? How important is that there are connections between those?
I don't know if I find that alarming for me, and I think too with my excellence background and coming from a Baldrige City and serving as an examiner with a performance excellence program here in Texas, it's sad to me because I do think that it is absolutely critical that every department tie their work and tie their outcomes to the broader strategic objectives of the city. Um, I think that when that alignment is clear, it does two things. It helps the department prioritize in a way that's consistent with what the city's trying to do, and then it and I feel like this is probably even more important. It really just it creates a shared sense of purpose, right? So people, our frontline workers understand how what they do every single day really contributes to that bigger picture. I think we have departments in this organization who really model that well, who we see where they're aligning the work they do with planning documents, with performance measurements, and really understand that. I think that our environmental services and sustainability department is a really good example. So they are consistently tying their work to our key focus areas, which is our strategic plan, our key focus areas. They're also tying that work to our climate action plan, which folds beautifully into council's key focus areas. And they're aligning it with the comprehensive plan, the parks master plan, and really looking at how the work they do aligns across the organization. I still think that there's work to do in terms of really helping that alignment along, but we certainly have some really good examples of that here at Denton.
Ria, would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I think part of my job is really trying to get that strategic plan out there to employees, right? And the thing that makes it difficult is just logistics. I mean, we're constantly meeting with the directors who then work with the managers and the department heads to build these
Mhm.
strategic plans. And you would hope that they're consulting with their teams to fit in these initiatives. But sometimes it's like if they're boots on the ground, if they're always out, the ways that we communicate, whether it be our intranet, whether it be email blasts, whether it be employee newsletters, they don't always have access to that stuff. So it doesn't surprise me that there's a small percentage of people in the field that don't know about the strategic plans. But I will say that presentations and any buys for money or things like that always go or lean more towards the people that know their stuff. So
Hmm.
if I'm saying, well, how does this tie into the city's strategic priorities, and you can't answer that, that for me is a problem, or at least, that softens their argument a bit for me if they don't know how it fits into the strategic plan.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. It's one of the things I've noticed again, being here in the water sector now for over a year, is that the work being done absolutely ties into almost every strategic plan that I've come across. Like whether it's infrastructure or it's health and safety or it's sustainability, like there's so many broader strategic objectives that municipalities are absolutely focused on. And water is critical in all of those areas. And it just it seems to me that there's in a lot of cases there's gaps there between actually the people in the front lines doing that work and understanding, or at least the intentionality behind connecting that to those broader strategic goals, and vice versa. Like people sitting in those leadership chairs, and they're having that understanding and comprehension of how critical water is to all of those, strategic objectives that they've set out. Um, Let me ask you guys this question. And I know we're kind of coming up close to time. I'll use Zach's playbook here and say two more questions. Um, so, thinking just to the audience here, which is a lot of, program coordinators, that, would probably be in that chair of either presenting to, a leadership panel about the results in their program. And it could just be for recognition. It could be for um, additional funding or resourcing. Like any kind of words of wisdom or advice that you would give to them in terms of how they go about doing that to, properly communicate, best communicate, the work that they're doing in their day to day.
I feel like some of the four of the main things residents are concerned about, because as we send out like resident satisfaction surveys, you the top complaints are the visible ones: homelessness, public safety, um, recreation, or things like that. But they may not understand every technical detail, but residents do understand outcomes. So the communication with residents and as well as council and leadership is the water safe? Is the infrastructure being maintained? Are we being responsible with the taxpayer dollars? And is the city planning for the future? Will my water be safe in the future? And if you can't answer those four questions, or if your initiative doesn't fall under one of those four questions, then honestly, a lot of the departments do all of that amazing work and the public never hears about it because
Yeah.
it's assumed that it's going to be done. So communicating performance helps residents understand the value of the work happening behind the scenes. And it also builds credibility and confidence in the government, because you never hear about it until there's a problem. And if there's not a
Yeah.
problem, you guys are doing a great job. But there's other ways to frame it. So I think that just that would be my tidbit, is answer those four questions in
Yeah.
some way or another. And it probably will get better reception when people can understand it and apply it to their own life.
Yeah, we haven't even really dove into the whole citizen engagement piece of it. That would be another half-hour webinar to talk about that, but
Exactly.
that is a big piece as well. But Chris, what about like your chair as kind of like working with different organizations on their budget process? Like could you probably sit on that receiving end as well, I'm guessing, of a lot of these proposals and presentations and such. What advice would you give to like program coordinators that are when they engage with their leadership teams to advocate for their programs?
Yeah. So a couple of things. We break down the criteria. Ria, you rattled off a host of them. Um, Whatever your strategic plan priorities are, is it a safer community? Is it environmental sustainability, economic vitality? and how those are defined, infrastructure, health and well-being, and so on, being able to consistently frame your presentations around your achievements towards those outcomes is probably the best thing that you can do. The second best thing that you can do is then to bring in, and Rhea, you were alluding to this point as well, any sort of metrics on whether it's benchmarking, how you're striving to ensure that you're delivering the service as fiscally responsibly as possible. Can you demonstrate greater efficiency? Can you demonstrate better benchmarks compared to peer jurisdictions? How can we nail that point that you're not only effective but efficient? And then perhaps last but not least is also the converse. What have you prevented? And being able to be clear with the KPIs or the performance measures that you're achieving. Let's be really clear what this looks like if we are not achieving these goals. And those examples are findable within the United States, within North America, certainly within the world, that it's not taken for granted. This stuff doesn't just happen automatically in perpetuity. And especially as there's more fiscal pressure on your jurisdiction and on your utility, we have to be able to show how close we might be to teetering towards insufficiency. You don't want to be playing a scare tactic, but you need to be realistic about the consequences.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I think a lot of people are afraid maybe of fear mongering or cautious of fear mongering. But to be honest, it's the cold hard truth. Like, if this work doesn't get done and it doesn't get done properly, like, there's some pretty drastic consequences that could happen, right? Yeah. Amy, last word on this one.
Well,
What's your recommendation?
I don't know. I think Rhea's reading my mind. Like, she did not know that I presented on the community survey last week and that I'm presenting to employees in about 30 minutes. And a big piece of that is what is visible is what gets noticed within the community. But, I agree with everything. I think that, it's important. Transparency is absolutely key in all of this. And we can't just be communicating performance where it highlights our successes. We also have to acknowledge challenges, opportunities for improvement. And, I think the public generally responds well to transparency when they see that we are being thoughtful, we're being accountable, and that we're being data informed. Even, I say it's the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? We have to be transparent about it all. And that again goes to that trust and that credibility. I think that's just so key in how we communicate.
Yeah, very cool. I'm looking at the clock. We're gonna be rapid fire on this last question, but I'd be completely remiss if I didn't ask you guys this, selfishly a bit. So, like, as a tech vendor, what are the observations or the suggestions you have for us in terms of how we can develop our tools for your organizations to be able to kind of facilitate the type of communication here that's necessary? And you got a little bit of a sneak peek there into some of the work we're doing to build out our own platform. But, like, do you have any kind of snippets you can offer in terms of the technology side of things? And yes, Amy,
I go with my most important one, right? I'll go with my most important one. I think that tools need to do more than just store information, right? They need to surface the right information to the right people and at the right time, because a lot of the communication breakdown happens not because the information doesn't exist, but because it's buried, it's fragmented, and we haven't really translated it into something that people can really act upon.
Very cool.
I would have piggybacked off of that and said, with Amy, when I'm demoing softwares, one of the questions I always ask from my seat is, do you provide dashboards and analytics? So it's like we can run canned reports all day, but if the person is not technical or they don't have that analytical background, make it easier for them. Provide that in your software so that they can just open it, see their dashboard on day to day, and management can keep tabs that way. So
yeah. Chris, what about you? I mean, you built the technology, so you built the software. You should have some thoughts here.
Increasingly, we think about where we are with the technology that is evolving. and being able to take advantage for all the reasons we've talked about in this discussion. I think up until now and sometime into the future, the interface, the dashboard that was the product, and we're right in the middle of some sort of hybrid era. We'll see how it all turns out, where the visualizations, the right data to the right person, the right time is still absolutely critical. But there becomes new needs, new players such as AI agents in the mix, and the need for structured data to be readily made available. So it's the interface, yes, and the dashboards and the visualizations, and now the accessibility of structured data, such that agentic capabilities can take advantage of the vast amounts of organized data that you have to make it presentable for the right decisions at the right time, at the spur of the moment, which is, I think, where we're headed in the future, in an excited way.
Very cool. I could talk to you guys for a long time. I wish we could keep going. Really appreciate you all joining here. I know our